Well, a very, very warm welcome to the Nürburgring. This is the start of the longest day. It's a Saturday morning and it's warm-up. 40 minutes for the cars that have had so much drama already through practice and through the various qualifying sessions. And unfortunately, we've lost one of the front-running cars, struck from the record, not going to be taking part, the Shira Sport PHX Audi. Porsche, I beg your pardon, that Lawrence Van Tor had a big tumble in yesterday out at the back of the circuit. Schwedenkreuz up to Arenberg, one of the favourites out. But right now, it's getting out onto the circuit. My name is Bruce Jones, and alongside my regular Nürburgring mate, Peter Snowden. Conditions look perfect. What's the purpose of the warm-up?
Data collection yet again. Thank you, Bruce. Very kind intro there. I wasn't sure. I was a bit slow. I wasn't sure it was me you were talking to. Thank you. Yeah, there's always data to collect. We saw this at Le Mans last week, didn't we? When we had Hyperpole, and then followed by FP4 afterwards, and we said, why go out? And even Cadillac, that had locked out the front row, said, you never stop learning. You never stop learning. No matter how many rounds of NLS to do before the N24 hour, this isn't, of course, a round of NLS, but they still go and gather data. It's a 40-minute session, so you're going to get 5 laps, maybe 3, 4 if you count an out and an in, etc. And it's not many. It doesn't sound like a lot, but of course, in terms of kilometres under the belt and data on the laptop, 3 laps of the Nürburgring is 75 kilometres.
That's a factor that always needs to be brought up, because even though we've been doing races here for a very long time at Nürburgring, it still stands out. But talking of standing out, you could pull some names out of the hat before arriving, but Kevin Estre would be the one you'd be looking for. You'll go in the sweepstake, and he absolutely delivered in top qualifying last night. A few of the other qualifiers had their own problems and were demoted, but at the end he was took pole by over a second. Okay, it's an enormously long circuit, but just under 26k. But there's something about Kevin Estre, and you had a very good point talking before we came on air. He was a bit busy last weekend, as were an enormous number of the drivers, particularly now GT3 is one of the classes at the junior class in the Le Mans 24 Hours. But of course, he was driving a prototype, so he's had to completely change the chip in his brain. The circuit could not be more different, but he came here and bang.
I think it's just a barometer of how the top drivers operating at this level, anybody, whatever the sphere would be, whether it's a yachtsman or world-class athletes, cricketers, tennis, concert pianists, whatever. If you're at the top of your game, you're at the top of your game. And measure that for me was Estre last week at Le Mans in a Porsche 963 hypercar. The car gets disqualified from qualifying, put to the back of the hypercar grid. Therefore, he has to come all the way through. And did he? Of course did, because it's Kevin Estre. That's what he does. And then he comes to Nürburgring. Okay, he does know the place. You could say it's his job, dismissively. It isn't that easy to go from Le Mans in a hypercar to a week later the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife, in a GT3 car, and he's still at the top of his game.
And talk about taking part in the unholy trinity. He'll be racing next weekend at the Spa 24 Hours. I mean, there's never been a year when you've had 3 24-hour races at absolute tip-top level in consecutive weekends. There are going to be a lot of very, very tired drivers after that, and some probably popping on planes to go to the far side of the world to race something else. I mean, such is the spread of GT3.
I think there's 6 drivers that I know of, 6 or 7 that I know of, that are doing all 3 events. Again, in different cars, different circuits, different sort of setup, and they will have earned that August break, won't they?
Oh, they certainly will. Not a bad grouping of circuits.
No.
Le Mans, like it. Nürburgring, like it a whole lot more. Spa, something completely different. Last year, the weather came to play here at big time, of course. It was the year of the fog, only 50 laps covered, and the race called early. And ironically, at that very moment, you'd already nipped out of the commentary booth to go and get some fuel for the car for the journey away. And you said, not far from the circuit is full sunshine, but the cap of the fog, sat atop the circuit on the start-finish straight. As we started packing up the booth, we looked up, looking across the start-finish straight. Good grief, we could suddenly see the main tower again. It was changing, and as we drove away, we felt almost fraudulent, I recall. But anyhow, that was 2024. This is 2025. Still waiting for the time to start coming in. Let's just focus the minds. Of course, the fastest lap in qualifying, 8 minutes 12. It's a long, old circuit, but right now, looking at the weather conditions, it's hot. It's hot across all of Northern Europe at the moment. That's going to be something the drivers don't really feel too great about, but you just got to get on, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose relative-wise, you think about Le Mans last weekend, we're talking, call it 3:25 for a lap around Le Mans in a hypercar. So around here, a hypercar probably 6.5 minutes, let's say. So they're 2.5 minutes slower in a GT3 car, and a totally different setup as well. and so much to learn. There's nowhere to relax on the Nordschleife. That's the point. There is literally nowhere to relax, and we're just being treated a little bit of onboard footage at the moment with, I think it is the Estra car, the 911 Get Grello, going up towards the carousel. And I say this time and time again, it's a ribbon of tarmac between nothing. You have this, you barely have a car's width of grass either side, and then the barriers.
It's a thin ribbon.
It is the smallest, infinitesimal little safety net at the side of the track, and it's the highest part of one of the highest speed parts of the circuit.
And don't forget, of course, they're not just racing against other cars in the SP9 class, which is the nomenclature for the GT3s. It's air towel down to cars with an enormously inferior performance potential, but being driven to the edge of their potential. So this factor, and when you look at the circuit on a beautiful sunny day, you get lots of areas where there's this sort of stroboscopic effect of the shade from trees. So that's a tiring factor. Then at any of those patches of shadow, it could be a car that's limping home slowly, or just simply that's its top speed, and you're coming past potentially 60 miles an hour faster. So your point about never having a point to relax is entirely true.
A friend of mine who you met asked me the other day, he was a massive cricket fan, so he's off and doing his bits at the moment, and he said, so what is it about this the Nürburgring 24? What captures your imagination? And I said exactly what you just said. Right, I said, you've got the top drivers. I said, you've not just got 24 other cars around them or thereabouts, you've got 24 or more other classes, and you've got 24 hours of racing to do that in. And you've got to compress all that in and go on your toes all the time. That's what you've got to be aware of.
The teams also, you look at many points, you look at the World Championship, if someone pulls a very early pit stop, they're desperately trying to work out where that car's going to slot out back into the traffic. Will it be ahead of a group or behind a group? But in this, I mean, the traffic is everywhere. Could you get a gaggle of cars that delay you by 2 or 3 seconds a lap? Easily, several times per lap. So it's really, it's I think almost more of a gut feeling. It's a bit of an imprecise art. Of course, you can look at all the tracker maps and see where gaggles of cars going around. But with a field of, well north of 100 cars, it's going to be very, very busy. But that's the playing field.
I think it's almost a slight reverse for the strategists in this sort of racing, certainly in these 24-hour events. So you don't have that luxury of finding a gap to slot them into. You slot them in and then work out what to do with it and how to make it work best. Plus, given the length of the race and the other cars, what are they going to do? And you said that's before you allow for other cars, different classes, different speed differentials. And I always try and steer away from the phrase slower cars. Yeah. It's not fair. They're as fast as they can in their class. They've just got a speed differential, which is hugely important. And that's why these guys have to have this permit to understand that. And it's why you have to do certain levels, lower categories, if you like, that speed differential to understand it. And before you get into a GT3 car, which always gets all the attention. But the GT3 cars have to get their way through all the other traffic. But have no doubt about it, those other cars are just as instrumental in making that happen and work as those GT3 cars.
Yeah, there will be times in the 24 hours ahead where we both, and probably everyone commentating, will call them slower cars. You just lapse into that. There's no offence meant, so do please understand that. Right, cars still being brought in after that, the classic race, still being towed in. So a few waved yellow flags at various points around the circuit, meaning, that first lap, first flyer as it gets to be completed will not be a super fast one, because also it came from the static start from the pits. We'll see what the pace is elsewhere, but people setting good sector times include Thomas Priding, Manthey EMA, so that is a car that's just
teammate, yeah,
exactly, Kevin Estra's teammate. And another car going well is the Rover Racing BMW M4, driven by Augusto Farfus. Now get this, Farfus has been doing this race seemingly forever, and several more days thrown in for good effect. And he was a winner a very, very long time ago. I'm going to slide down through something like 2004. I did write it down yesterday. But, the spread of drivers in this race, to win this race is an extraordinary feat. You have to remember that, because there are so many things around the Nürburgring that can trip you up. It could be the weather. It could be a puncture right at the start of your lap. You only have 26 kilometres, limp home, don't worry, you won't lose much time, and so on and so forth. But several drivers have sort of risen to the top time and time again. Those are the ones you have to doff your hat to. Well,
I've just waxed lyrical about Kevin Estra, and to put that in perspective, such is the quality of the drivers in this field. When did he last set pole here? 2014, 11 years ago.
What was he driving? I shall tell you, because it caught me out. It was a Dürr Motorsport McLaren.
Yeah, it's a McLaren, wasn't it? Yes. You never think of Kevin Nash from McLaren.
No, you don't.
Now we've got a very slow Sven Miller.
Sven Miller is just, well, that's obviously what it means.
Yes.
You're doing a little bit of translation as you go. Now, is that a problem, or, well, certainly I would have thought it probably is a problem, because he's keeping out of the way. He's moving, again, that's the knowledge of the circuit.
So that's the 33 Falcon Porsche, 33 and 44, they're two numbers they often use. Yes, and he's pulling off to the side of the track there.
What's the warm-up for? I'm just going to go back to that original question.
Not breaking your car.
Right, this is a car that's qualified 4th on the grid. Nico Menzer was driver at the time. And just to let you know the order on the grid, it's the EMA Porsche number 911 on pole. Thomas Neubauer, fantastic run on Yokohama's to put his Kondo Rinaldi Racing Ferrari second. Third on the grid, Maro Engel, Get Speed Mercedes. That looks pretty ominous as well. And then 4th is the car that just pulled to the side of the track.
Metzgersfeld, that pulled off at, and we've been treated to some onboard footage there looking inside the car at Sven Muller, and he was clearly in communication with the team because he was nodding and pressing buttons on the wheel. So hopefully, it certainly wasn't an accident. He was pulling out of the way under its own steam or lack of steam. Suggests it might be, let's say, an alt control reset type thing, something that can reset. But that is worrying. You said, what is warm up for? And you go out, just go settle the car in, ready for a few hours later when you make the race start. Just that final adjustment, a little bit of temperature, understand what the circuit's like, and it stops. And is it fuel? Is it a fuel pump? Is it something simple? Is it electronic? Has a fuse popped? Or is it something more terminal? And your heart must sink as you're sitting there just going, it's just a 40-minute warm-up. I was only going to do 3 laps.
Right, so you've done all that effort in qualifying. You've qualified 4th fastest. The car will be brought back to the pits. Can it be fixed in time to get out onto the grid? Because you have this enormously long procedure ahead of the race, effectively an hour or so. The race start is at 4 o'clock. But does it mean all your efforts are for naught and you're going to have to start from pit lane? Obviously, you've got the field of cars will set off in groups, so the high-performance group, the SP9 class cars will go first. But it could be a tiny part of the car. It could be an electrical gremlin. I hope it's something mechanical. They're easier to sort out. But fingers crossed for the team, because, I mean, what a blow. Again, a lot of those people, a lot of the drivers in that grouping, 33 Porsche, that's driven by, obviously, the driver who pulled off, Sven Muller, Alessio Picariello, Nico Menzel and Julian Andlauer. You know, Andlauer absolutely flew at Le Mans, didn't he, for Porsche? But there it is, pulled off at Metzgersfeld, and already there's a vehicle to start turning it clear, but that's effectively to get it clear and behind the barriers, but it's still a very long way to get it back to the pits. And don't the teams have to learn where the rest of the internal roads are around this circuit? Because if you've never seen the Nürburgring Nordschleife before, you can be a very, very long way from the pits. And certainly some points you'd have to get the cars, you'd have to know the rescue routes, and you can have half a clue where your car is when it's being brought back. But anyhow, it is what it is.
Well, better news for the Muller family. Dirk Muller in the 63 HRT full performance Mustang, whilst he has pitted, he is currently the fastest car on the circuit in the warm-up with an 8:19.538. He has pitted. Second place is the number 11 car, which is the Janis Fritcher-driven Mercedes AMG.
Yeah, just for clarity,
Schnitzel-Alm car, that is.
The parents and Sven Dirk are different Mullers, so they're not brothers by different mothers, or maybe they are, but they're not related, put it that way.
Smith in English.
Or Miller, even.
Yeah, Miller, exactly. And the other Falcon Porsche, number 44, with it's Tim Heinemann, isn't it, at the wheel?
Tim, yeah. Well, he knows this circuit supremely well. He's done an awful lot of NLS, Nürburgring Langstrecken Series races. And again, if you're coming to this as the opening round of the Intercontinental GT Challenge, because you've heard of the Nürburgring and a lot of your favourite drivers are racing here, but you've never seen the Nordschleife, this isn't the only time this year it gets used. It's used effectively about 7-8 times with this, not in the championship, but it's in the middle of the season. It's, of course, the big one. The other races, probably 4-hour races. We rather nattily call them the NLS. It's the Nürburgring Langstrecken Series, the long distance series. And one of the many great things about it isn't just the circuit, it's the way that it's run, and it's the way that drivers who want to take part in this race in the top class have to come and learn their craft. Not in the cars they'd be racing here, the GT3 cars that should be called SP9, the Nürburgring, but in cars that are lower nomenclature, no performance. And you sometimes flick through your list early in April and you've got down to about car number 184. You go, good grief, with someone like Jack Aitken in years gone past. Top drivers, so it always pays to read your NLS entry. But once they behave properly, you get the green ticket.
One of the things I love that warm-up brings up is not everybody goes out and has a run at the same time as normal. It's a bit of, not a free-for-all, but it's a little bit more informal, shall we say. Fourth fastest currently is Ben Leuchter in the Max Cruise Racing Golf GTI from Alternative Fuels category. So we've got a Golf. It might be a minute slower than the GT3 cars. A minute round here is not a minute somewhere else. That's a very, very credible time. So you've got 3 GT3 cars up there and an alternative fuel-powered Golf.
And now it's not just because it set its lap very early on. It's actually faster than some of the GT3 type cars. So, but wait and see, because actually now the times are starting to flow. And it seems like we've forgotten we've even started this session. It takes so long for some of the others to come through, because as they peel out of the pits, you can't all leave at the same time. So necessarily, that sort of the opposite of a concertina, an elongating effect as the field strings out. So it's a bit like on the opening lap of a race. You might be almost as quick as the person in first, but you're 8th, and you're therefore about 16 car lengths behind, even if you're running sort of line astern. Right, quicker times are beginning to come through, but at the moment it's HRT Ford Performance. That's the Hout Racing team, founded by Hubert Hout. So much success on this circuit, and then since then in his business career, and running the Ford Mustang. So the Blue Oval gang will be very happy indeed. But really the story, if you're just joining us, whetting your appetite ahead of this afternoon's 4 o'clock kickoff, local Central European time for the 24 hours, is the number 16 crew have been withdrawn. And that's really unfortunate. A very large shunt yesterday for Lawrence Van Toor, a winner, don't forget, in 2015. Patrick Pilet out, Patrick Niederhauser out, and Ricardo Feller out. And Pilet and Feller have also won the race. Feller in 24 last year, the foggy year, and Pilet in 2018. But Pilet is down to drive 2 cars, so he's fortunate. He's got another opportunity in this race. So again, spreading his skills.
Isn't he in the 911 Porsche with Estra?
He is. He's in the Manthey EMA car. So he was in 2 Porsches. One was entered by Shearer Sport PXX. So for Shearer Sport, last year's winning team, they've actually just got to concentrate on their number 1 Audi, and that's setting some decent sector times at the moment. But it takes a lot of sector times to get around and complete your lap, and it's still the Ford at the top, Ford Mustang of Dirk Muller. So long a Ford man, so long before that a BMW racer, of course, as well. But the session nearly at its midway point, so it seems as though not a lot of people have set a time. But again, if you weren't rushing straight out of the pits, you will still be coming around to complete your first flying lap. You've done your out lap. The flying lap is the one, obviously, that gets on the board. And for those that are out there and have had problems, I'm looking at you, Falcon Motorsport, with your number 33 Porsche. Let's hope you can get it fixed. But then again, if you decided not to run, that problem could have risen just at the start of the race. So again, it does have a purpose. Porsche's looking very tidy, but they're not at the top. It's the Ford Mustang at the top, number 63 of Dirk Muller. Second fastest, a man who knows this circuit forward, backwards and sideways. And it's Kenneth Heyer, the SRO Motorsport by Schnitzelarm Mercedes. 4 seconds slower. You think it's night and day. Just remember, the circuit is 26 kilometres long, or in old money, getting close to 16 miles. So it's an awfully long circuit. This combination of the first part of the Grand Prix track and then going out onto the real stuff, the full metal stuff, the Nordschleife itself, those 2 lefts, the last time you breathe as you go through Sabine Schmidt's curves, it gets really properly seriously. I just love that first sector out of that, when you go through Hatzenbach and Hocheichen, and then it gradually opens out Kittelbacher and away. But that first section through Hatzenbach, no wonder about 45,000 people put up their tents, their trucks, their hot tubs, their dry ice machines, and they sit there with their cold glass of beer, or glass of cold beer if you want to put it the other way around, and it's just a brilliant place to watch the cars.
Well, there's so many layers to it being a perfect spectator area there, isn't it? Because the grass banks are elevated, so you can actually look down on the track, so you get to see them appear. They come through Sabine Schmidt's curve, as you said, off the Grand Prix circuit, relatively slow, 180-degree hairpin, which you always say, it's the gateway to the Nordschleife. It's on the GP circuit, the sanitised bit, where there's massive wide track, huge gravel areas, runoffs, all sorts of big safety net. Yeah, I jest a bit, and all of a sudden there's this pinch point, and no better name could have been chosen to start the transition from the GP circuit to the Nordschleife than Sabine Schmidt to right, now focus, boys and girls, this is the real circuit. And you suddenly get this roller coaster of lefts and rights and don't forget, as we said last time, there's bits of curbs you can and cannot use there. A track walk around here takes a day, effectively. It's good for the boys, though, good for your step count. But the spectators can sit above, can stand above and watch these cars coming through here. And of course, that first lap is the one where you get a little bit of freedom for the top class, as in the fastest class cars, the SP9s, GT3 cars. They'll get effectively about a lap and a half maybe, of running with themselves, and then you start to get to the back markers. Very quick little stat for you, very interesting here. We talked about Kevin Estre being on pole, finally, after 2014. When was the last time an N24 was won from pole position?
I did look up that figure, and it's something like 14 or 15 years ago?
2008.
In my money, that's roughly 14 or 15.
Yeah, I didn't disagree.
With a little change.
Yeah.
I was just actually thinking when we were talking about the sort of notion of going around the Grand Prix circuit, and then you get to those two lefts named after Sabine. Oh, ought to explain who Sabine Schmitz is.
Yes.
Was, because alas, we lost her to cancer a handful of years ago. She was someone who literally was raised on this circuit, did so many passenger laps, but also a two-time winner of this very event when she raced under her maiden name of Sabine Reck. Both times in a SRO Motorsport BMW M3, and 1996 and 1997. She became especially well known in the UK when she joined the Top Gear crew a long time ago and just did fantastic stunts. Real personality, enormously missed. But just going back to the point about leaving the Grand Prix circuit and then it suddenly gets series, I can just imagine a friend of mine going, yada, 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 ooh. She does that quite a lot. But it is just magnificent. And today the conditions are tip-top perfect from the driving point of view and possibly the tyres point of view. They'd rather like the temperatures to fall by about 5 degrees.
But to finish my point very quickly on that last time from pole position, 2008, it was Mark Lee, Roman Dumas, Tiemann Bienhardt and Marcel Tiemann driving a Manthey Porsche.
Exactly. So these things, sometimes a thread runs through something, and you cut Olaf Manthey in half, you cut the Nürburgring in half, cut Porsche in half, put them all together, you've got 1.5. But it's right here. You don't just keep winning events
By accident.
No,
it doesn't happen. Great shame, as you say, to see the Shearer Sport Porsche out with no Shearer Sport PHX, as it was Phoenix, now Shearer Sport PHX. Synonymous with Audi, which is why it's slightly surprising when you said about Kevin Estre earlier driving a McLaren all those years ago. I've forgotten he'd done that. He must have been in kindergarten at that point when he was driving a McLaren. Didn't even know they made McLaren race cars then when he was that young. Shearer Sport, Audis running that Porsche. They've won a round of NLS this year. Great shame to see that car out. Is it a Porsche one this year? I don't know. You cannot discount Manthey, Shearer. The Mustang looks to have the pace. Has it got the endurance? I don't know yet. It's not. I'm not doubting it. It's a question mark still. It's certainly got the pace, and in some ways it shouldn't have. Looking at the technology and the ethos of that car against a modern Porsche, big front-engined Mustang. Does it work? Should it work? I don't know. An Aston shouldn't work on the same basis. AMG, Get-Speed, Mercedes and others, Schnitzel, should they work front-engine? And that's one of the things, again, I love of this. You've got such variety of thinking and design philosophy. We put them on the track and they still all work. The Mustang, I think, I wouldn't discount it for a very good finish.
Another element that we have to knit in is tyres. We have so many, they're on Yokohamas. Were those particularly good for qualifying? Well, you have to say they are, because though that qualified easily just inside the top 10, the number 65 Ford, the best of those, the car second on the grid also on Yokohamas. That was the Kondo Racing with Rinaldi Ferrari. Thomas Neubaut, excellent young French driver doing the job there. But what's the relevance of qualifying? It's how your tyre's going to work across the 24 hours. Of course, it gives you a foot up if you can qualify at the front of the grid. It means you might get out of the trouble on the opening handful of laps. It buys you an advantage. But so many things to consider. And we're very, very accustomed to having multi-class racing across various championships, but they're on uniform tyres. This place, of course, you suddenly get a temperature swing, and we've seen this over the years here when it gets to nightfall. Tonight, I don't think it's going to cool down too much, but other times it has, and suddenly one brand of car may be on a particular tyre, and suddenly they come into it. They get their sweet spot is until it warms up again on Sunday morning, and it does look as though it's going to be a very warm summer Sunday here as well. But
well, that leads me very neatly into a comment that was made by Estre after pole position yesterday, was that the temperature, total contrast to last year where we had the shortest race on history delayed by fog, and not very good temperatures, to say the least. Then we went racing. This one, so far, all forecasts predict it's going to be a really, really hot one, which has a totally different effect on the cars. Obviously, the tyres, degradation's a big thing. So the drivers need to manage those tyres more than they would normally. And of course, the engines operating at these speeds and temperatures for longer. They're racing machines, they're thoroughbreds. They have a very small operating window. That's why they don't like really ticking over that well and that kind of stuff, and often won't restart because they're too hot if they're spud and stalled or something like that, because they're not road cars. They're absolutely not. They have a very, very small competitive operating window. That's changed because of the temperatures. It's going to affect things enormously. I think we could see a whole load of variables into this race.
Well, so that, I say, fantastic, because, I mean, that's the nature of the game. You can come at things from all angles, but the Nürburgring 24 Hours, over the decades, it's risen, it's fallen. Sometimes you had some incredibly competitive crews at the front end, but not a lot of depth in terms of quality at the top end of the field. There's always been depth because the fields have always been enormous. But you have to say, the last 10 years, this event has got better and better and better. There have been spikes before when you've got works teams and top privateers teams at the top, but the spread of GT3 as a sort of global formula has enabled more and more cars to enter the top class here, and that list I think we've got 20, I could do them numbers, 27 cars, I think, in the top class. However, we mustn't forget that an awful lot of other classes up and down the field. I mean, the Cup 2 class, Porsche 911 GT Cup class cars is chock full, etc., down through the classes. And in fact, that one, quite often, they get to lead the race early on because they make their first pit stop after the SP9 GT3 cars do at the front of the field. So they get their moment in the sun, very, very competitive, always close in times in qualifying. But you have to, I think, to really enjoy this race, I think you need to decide when you're watching. You can draw up, wherever you are in the world, you can draw up the live timing, so you can scroll up and down, choose a class, take a look at a class, suddenly go, let's look at the Porsche Cup 3 class. There's so many things to look for, and we can't tell all the stories as they unfold. We'll try and pick out the top ones, but there is such diversity in this field. And I tell you what, if you go and look at the entry list, you'll find some very well-known names dotted the whole way down the order. So a lot to look for. Don't just follow the images on the screen. Go and find your own stories, and I think you'll really find it very, very rewarding indeed. The one thing I don't think you'll find, unless there's a sudden thunderclap overnight, it does look as though the weather should stay hot and dry for the remainder of the race. And with that, the thunderclouds rolled in.
Exactly. As our colleague, and I don't want to steal the thunder, see what I did there, of our colleague Joe Bradley, more of whom you'll hear later during the race weekend, he always describes sports car racing, and especially a 24-hour race on a circuit like this, on this theatre, it's a high-speed game of chess. And I've often used that line, so I'm always credited for it, Joe. But it is exactly that. It is a high-speed game of chess, because just when you think you've got the advantage, or you haven't, somebody else is watching your strategy and thinks, hang on, we'll take advantage of that. It's like we were saying about, you don't have that luxury you have in other series, single-make series with, say, a control tyre. There's so many variables that somebody's been doing something, we'll take advantage of that, and it may not appear to play into their hands right now. It might even take a whole stint or two to come out. It might be 4 or 5 hours down the line where you're sitting there thinking, well, that hasn't done anything. It's a long way to get. And it's drivers hate that. Absolutely hate that, because drivers want instant results now.
They want to know where they're ranking. They want to just really get it.
Well, not just in being second, because that's first loser, but they want to be told all the time now, instant results. And it's one of the things that team managers have to do. One of their biggest parts of managing drivers is to get them to calm down and be a team player and be an employer of the team, not a driver. I know that sounds odd, but it's like, no, this is play the game, because it might be 40 minutes, it might be 40 laps, it might be 4 hours time. This will play to our advantage. But if you don't do this now, you messed up for the whole team.
And the other element, so many of these drivers have been racing in sports cars for a long time now. Almost all of them would have started in single seaters, the older ones. And
the ones in their 30s, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Crikey, wrinkles around the eyes, the whole lot. But one of the things is when you're the one in the team who drops the ball. Yesterday, that was Mirko Bortolotti. was outstanding in the opening part of his lap in top qualifying, and then didn't slow enough further around the lap for red flags.
Yes.
Went, they had him banged to rights, and he said, I was just so focused, I really, got it right. Mirko, absolutely, heart on his arm.
Exactly.
Qualified 5th, but he's now thrown to the back, and he's on a sort of walk, they're looking at his license and all that, because as we've talked about this before, they are so strict about people not observing the rules. So he was heartbroken professionally, but also for his teammates.
I also thought professionally, and credit to the character as well, that he took it on the chin and just went, entirely my fault, I was focused on that, I shouldn't have been, this is what I was doing. It's no way he condones it. And of course, the big thing here for the organisers and officials is it's putting other people into danger. That's the issue.
Yeah, and when you run an event on a circuit as gargantuan as the Nordschleife, you absolutely have to be confident that all of your marshals and people clearing up cars that have crashed, cars that have just pulled to the side, can do so in safety. And bear in mind, there are very few points. You've got a long line of sight, unlike a regular racing circuit. So all those factors. Haro. Right, there's one crew in this race driven entirely by Austrian drivers. East Talent Racing team, Simon Reicher's team, but Max Hofer has just put that second fastest on the timesheets, albeit 2 3/4 seconds slower than that seemingly excellent lap from Dirk Muller that's put the number 63 HRT Ford Performance Mustang to the top of the charts. But that means there's a little bit of movement. It also means we've got manufacturer variety. At the moment we go forward from Audi, from Mercedes, from Porsche. It's a pretty good mix at the top. Best Ferrari, by the way, is not too much further down. It's the Kondo racing car. Thomas Neubauer did the pole, did his lap yesterday. It's David Perel, the South African driver, who's got it about 8th on the time
on
shot.
the front row next to the... Yes.
Yeah.
For the actual quote for the race. Yeah.
And having talked about Mirko Bortolotti, he's in the Red Bull Team Abs Lamborghini on Motorsport. He had it yesterday. It's now in the hands of Danny Juncadella. And it's when you look at some of these crews, you just look at the sheer quality of the drivers. And when you look at their career histories, I've got a file. It's so analog you wouldn't believe it. But when a driver wins a championship, that championship gets highlighted, and some drivers have an awful lot of more black ink on theirs than others, and lots have come second and third, but the likes of Bortolotti, the likes of Juncadella have won championship title after championship title, so they're pretty good. 7.5 minutes remain, and it does seem quite a few cars have managed to get 2 flying laps in. And I praise Danny Juncadella, and he goes to check out the conifers on the outside of the carousel.
That was very close.
Yeah, and he was being pushed around the circuit by the purple nose, pink and purple Get Speed Mercedes, car number 17. That's shared by Ralph Aron, Lucas Auer, another Austrian driver, Adam Christodoulou, and Mikel Grenier. I think Grenier is on board. But that was right in behind. It's unusual to see, a driver like Danny Juncadella make a mistake, and he went super high. He got into the concrete inner line on the carousel, and so nearly. Then he goes up, the slope eases away, doesn't it? If you're not on that concrete inner banking, it's less steep. But he was right up to the white line, and behind the white line about 4 centimetres, and then he got the barriers at the carousel. But somehow, I think by breathing in, he managed to miss them.
Well, I guess I need to probably explain for listeners of my exhaling. It was watching the replay footage of exactly that moment with Danny Juncadella going into the carousel, and I'm just watching a little bit further around now. It has a little bit of snap understeer. It turns into the carousel, as you rightly say, Bruce. He wants to hook the front of that Lamborghini into the concrete, and it just doesn't bite, and it pops out. And of course, it's cambered, and it's suddenly a whole different surface change. And next, he's heading with a lot of left-hand lock on towards the barriers. How he didn't connect with the barriers, I do not know. That was a very, very close escape. He's staying ahead of that purple Mercedes for the rest of this lap, but watching that car, I think the Mercedes has backed off a little bit to say, I'm just going to give you a little room in case you have your own moment. But the front end of that Lamborghini Danny Juncadella, it's warm-up for both of us, cars and commentators. Just doesn't look like it's dialed in and wanting to go where Danny Juncadella wants to put it. A man that was quite unhappy at Le Mans last week when I interviewed him as well, wasn't he? About balanced performance and stuff.
He was quite brief in his reply, I feel. Curt, maybe.
Yes. To the point.
Under pressure. So, not too many minutes left. 5 minutes left in this 40-minute warm-up. It's running through till 12:40 local time and race kick-off. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The weather is fine. It's very, very hot indeed, and an exquisite field of cars lining up. And ever the Nürburgring has a busy, busy agenda. I do remember covering the sort of classic race in the morning last year, and we went down on one of the practice days to see them go out, possibly even for qualifying. I remember standing, and about 50 cars came past. I went, impressive field, followed by another 50, and then probably about another 30 for good measure. So it's not only the main race that has so many cars entered into it. So just to reiterate, the official entry list was 136 cars for the ADAC. Ravenol 24 Hours of Nürburgring for this year. The number 16 has been withdrawn. That's the Sport PHX Porsche. That was the one that Laurens Vanthoor crashed last night. He's shaken up. The car is broken up and will not be participating. He decided not to enter a spare. And again, one of those things. And going into Schwedenkreuz, looking at the replays, Laurens ran a little bit wide, hit the curb on the right, and it just started to turn the car. He went on the grass verge along the right, and then it was spat across the circuit. It was, and he very nearly, it was airborne when sometimes when you hit the tyre and then that sort of goes you up. And in fact, the tyres did exactly, it was tyres and barrier there on the outside of the corner. But the problem with that, one of the favourites scratched.
One of the problems with that kind of accident from the driver point of view, and hence the car is now pretty well destroyed, is that it hasn't scrubbed off any speed connecting things on the way to the point of the barriers. So it's gone in very hard. It's a massive retardation, which is why he's so shaken up about it. And he did say, Vanthoor, that it's possibly one of the biggest accidents of his career in terms of simple G-force and retardation. Not a good one. And who was the first person to go and check he was okay and spend some time with him in the medical centre? Kevin Estre.
Yeah, well, they've fought some battles together, haven't they, over the years? But, the respect is absolutely palpable. And I think Laurens said something about it wasn't good for him physically or sort of mentally, in terms of, you don't want to lose your mojo. But also, he did say maybe it wasn't the finest moment for that regular podcast he does with brother Dries, who'll presumably give him no mercy. They've got history in that department. And
at this race.
In this self-same race, we will draw a veil over what we're not going to describe for you. But they are hyper competitive. And don't forget that Dries, the younger of the two Vanthoors, had to stand in the back of the garage for years while Laurent was racking up win after win. And he learnt, and then got stuck in, and just treats him like another driver. Away from the track, they're very entertaining, but when the helmets are on, the gloves are off. Ford Mustang, number 65, in the pits at the moment. Dirk Muller is the driver who set the time. And it's out on track. It's Dennis Fetzer, one of the sister cars. There are 3 HRT Ford performance cars, but classic case, you look at a car, it's a bit like in the old days, if you were at a circuit, you put a stopwatch on a car, it would then never come round again, it would report to the pit. So I was about to say Dennis Fetzer is going to show us what he can do. We've still got 2 minutes until the checkered flag will end this 40-minute warm-up session. But he's doing what a host of other drivers are doing. They drive out from the pits, down around the part of the Grand Prix circuit they're using, and then dive the back entrance into the pits. They've obviously decided they don't need another 25 kilometres or so. So just a little systems check at the end of possibly an earlier run in this warm-up and bringing it home. But still, the track will probably have a good 100 cars out on it. So this session will continue after the checkered flag falls until the last of them is brought home. And then they'll be thinking what they want in terms of mustard on their ham for lunch. And we'll proceed. Of course, I don't know. What did you used to eat, Snowy, before you did a race like this? Was it a full lunch and
absolute opposite.
Carafe of wine?
Absolute opposite. Very, very, very little, to be honest.
Was that a combination of nerves or just thinking I will eat little and occasionally as required?
Literally treat it as fuel rather than eating enough to keep you going. But personally, I think everybody's different. I personally didn't like. I didn't want to be full of food and whatever, just driving around, bounce around circuit in a car. Just not comfortable. So I'd rather be hungry, and literally I'm hungry then becomes mentally hungry as well, so you're more aggressive, theoretically. Insight to a driver's mentality there, as in quite mad. But there you go. Just quick note on that HRT Mustang, by the way, 2 points. It hasn't been bettered its time, it's got close to it. So the Marango in the Get Speed Mercedes has now done an 8:20, bear in mind Mustang was a 19.5. And Krones in the Rover Racing M4 has now gone third place at an 8:20.3. Uta Racing is 21, but it is just worth pointing out, that Mustang is a Pro-Am entry as well, remember?
Yeah,
Pro.
And Utah Racing is also a Pro-Am entry, and that's Pierre Caffer, former winner of this race, who just moved, he moved it up to 4th place. He's just been demoted because another Mustang has moved ahead of that. That's the number 64 entry, one of the 3 from the HRT 4 Performance team. And Dennis Olsen slots that into 4th overall, 1.4 seconds down. So bear in mind, it's a hugely long circuit, so that is a competitive time from the Norwegian racer. Great to see the fans out around the circuit, lining the barriers. Of course, they built these phenomenal structures, and get to watch the racing all day long, all night long, and then we'll see how their endurance goes through. But just going back to Dennis Olsen, I feel he's a driver who needs more accolades than he sometimes gets. Bearing in mind, this is a round of the Intercontinental GT Challenge. He was the champion, IGTC champion, and the Bathurst 12-hour winner, actually, back in 2019. Driving for Porsche in those days, Earl Bamber Motorsport, but since then he's nailed his colours to the Ford mast, and I think deserves a really good run. But session very nearly over, but of course the cars still have to bring it home around this enormously long circuit. So what have we learnt from this warm-up session? We've learnt that the car that's qualified 4th on the grid, the number 33 Falcon Motorsport car, the Porsche, pulled off at the side of the circuit for reasons unknown. But let's hope for all concerned, bear in mind Falcon Motorsports are running 2 Porsches, the 33, the one that's pulled off, and the 44. Let's hope it's something, the car gets back soon and can be fixed. Tim Heinemann was 10th fastest in the warm-up this morning in the sister Falcon Motorsport car, so that's there or thereabouts, Snowy. That's sort of where you need to be, running cleanly. And let's hope for the Falcon Motorsport crew. And they are such favourites here because they've supported all the long-distance races for more than a decade now, sometimes with 2 different brands of cars to keep the mechanics on the toes. But, they are a popular team with their 2 shades of sort of turquoise and greeny blue livery. And I do quite like a livery that lasts for years and you have consistency of sponsorship, because they do become part of the furniture, and you do really appreciate them when you realise how much money, for example, that tyre manufacturer has put into this circuit, which they adore for all the obvious reasons.
Well, it's the age-old thing, isn't it, of testing the product, ready for going out to commercially to selling on, win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Exactly, it all filters down. Point to make here is this race, the N24, is not part of the NLS, but it kind of is. Now, it isn't officially, but emotionally it is to everybody, because we know all the teams come and do it beforehand. We've only got to see that in the tail off on the next round, which happens to be NLS Light, which is very clever way of doing it, so no GT3 cars. But when normally, a normal season, the first NLS round post N24 sees a significantly smaller amount of people entries. So that tells us they all come and compete in this in the first place. What brand has won every race so far in NLS this year? A Porsche. 3 different teams, but it's been a Porsche. Is it time to break that in the big one?
Well, we will find out. Lamborghini's still in the running.
Tune in tomorrow at 5 to 4 to find out.
Yeah, I hope you tune in rather sooner than that. We've got a crack set of crews ready to commentate through the 24 hours. I hope they're ready. Loins girded. Cars still going around the circuit, including Danny Junkerdare, who, about 5 or 6 minutes ago, made both of us have a little intake of breath because he got it slightly wrong in that number 27 Red Bull team at Lamborghini at the corner. Slightly fearsome, slightly famous. Carousel very nearly hit the barriers. Anyhow, he now sees the checkered flag and will exhale. Will come the short way back round into the pit lane, so he'll drive around the bit of the Grand Prix circuit that they use, and then tuck it away. But car clearly running very nicely.
Yeah, just
so nicely. Just goes
the fastest
to the very top. So he went top by 3 seconds, an 8-minute 16 lap. That was better than quite a few of the crews managed in qualifying.
He's got that front end dialed in now, hasn't he?
He certainly has. What do you need to fix that? Yeah, fine. So here we go. Let's just run down the manufacturers at the top. Lamborghini with that last moment run from Danny Junkerdare, car number 27, then Ford, then Mercedes, then BMW, then Ford again, Audi, Porsche, Audi, Mercedes. What a spread of manufacturers. But Danny Junkerdare, one little slip up, but it didn't lead to any damage, and then he atoned. But absolutely excellent Spanish racer. Must be looking forward to this big time, and it'd be really quite something if a Lamborghini could win this race. Over the years, we've seen loads of speed from Lamborghinis in the long distance races at the Nürburgring in the 24 hours, but we haven't seen a win at the top level. Could it be their year? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. But at the moment, it's looking quite strong for Porsche, but that's in terms of qualifying pace. But then sometimes if you have enough weight of numbers, it will give you an opportunity to at least take a tilt. You do have to stay in it to win it. Last year, of course, weather was a massive factor. When I say weather, I mean fog, thick fog, and it meant we couldn't necessarily get the safety rescue vehicles to be able to evacuate anyone who was injured in the night. So it was decided eventually, when it just wouldn't shift from the high points of the circuit like Nürburgring and around the pits, that the end was brought early, but only 50 racing laps. Remember last year in the night, there was an update they'd give an update and say next update at
2 hours time.
2 hours time. So on and so forth.
Which unfortunately is absolutely the best that the officials can do, and that they cannot be anything other than compliments for trying to deal with it at the time. They've only got in front of them exactly what everybody else has. But you're hoping that in that, say, 2 hour window or the next hour, it will change and it will literally blow through. But unfortunately, what that means is it's all very well sitting looking at the outside going, well, it never happened. You don't know that at every 2 hours. But unfortunately, all the officials, all the teams, all the competitors, us included, you can't stand down because you're like, oh, we're back on 2 hours. Okay, right, so we're ready to go. So we're all primed and it's another bulletin at a set time, and we're going to look at it again in another hour's time. Okay, and it must be so frustrating for teams as well as to what do we do? Do we, it change? And of course, from a strategy point of view, when you've got, let's say, 10 hours to go, 10, 12 hours of the race to go, and it's stopped, for argument's sake, and we'll have a reconvene of a bulletin in 2 hours. That becomes 8, becomes 6, becomes 4, and it's like, well, hang on, your strategy and your fuel and stuff is so very different. So they're constantly readjusting, and I think we did actually do, didn't we, a few laps behind the safety car last year?
Yeah, no, they came out and I think they tried...
They did about 2 hours, I think.
5 laps, 6 laps, something like that, but of course running at really abated pace. Yeah. Right, things are still changing because of course when the checkered flag drops here, there are still so many cars around the circuit and it takes a long time to come through, and Jesse Krohn has just moved up into second place overall in the number 98 Rover Racing BMW. So at the moment it's Danny Juncadella top for Red Bull Team Abt in his Lamborghini, down to third place now for Dirk Muller, who for so long sat at the top of the table in his Ford Mustang, and they've all been demoted, but not all. Juncadella's still top, but Maro Engel, I just noticed he suddenly put some quick late lap sectors in, just under a second down from Danny Juncadella, so Maro Engel makes Mercedes smile. He's driving the number 14 entry, and he's definitely one I think I'd look for in this race. He's showing with Maxime Martin, Fabian Schiller and Lucas Stoltz, rock solid for get speed and second fastest here and now. But again, top 5 positions, 5 different manufacturers, and that is just in the top class of the race. And of course SP9 is also split into Pro-Am class and a smattering of AMs, and then we have all the other classes in this most extraordinary race. But I think for the bulk of them, it was a useful activity to get out of the way, the warm-up, and they might have learnt a little bit, but for some crews, particularly if they haven't been running their cars very much, it's an opportunity just to get the mileage in. But for others, they're racing them all around the world and they know them quite well. But of course, you've got the vagaries, the different tyres. A lot of the crews coming to this event, are using a different tyre manufacturer to the one they use in their regular championship season. But job done for Danny Juncadella, so Lamborghini top of the table, and I think the last few cars are just beginning to run in. And by the way, just looking down the charts, the best car not in the SP9 class is 17th overall, best in terms of speed, car number 94, Sante Royal Racing. It's of course all Porsche Cup cars in that class, 911 Cup class cars, so good job for them. But just to give you a measure on how far they are away from the ultimate pace, that's nearly 23 seconds down on this long lap from the fastest car. Of course, you wouldn't expect them to have the same pace around the entirety of a lap as an SP9 GT3 car, but for Luca Rettenbacher, job well done, and he'll have some bragging rights there. So last few moments as the drivers come in. For a lot of them that weren't taking part, they'll have had a sort of beady eye on the screen in the pit garage and probably quite glad in some cases not to be getting their race suit on just yet. There'll be plenty of suit time for them later in the race. But conditions at the circuit looking very fine indeed. The array of cars remarkably colourful. The liveries get more and more flamboyant every year for this great race, but just the sheer depth of the number of global superstar drivers, it grows and it grows.
I think just going back to your livery comment, is that I think part of that is the advent of technology that things are now vinyl wraps. So you can design something on a computer, and this is how I want it to look, and then create it and create a wrap and put it on, whereas it used to be artistic and paint and stuff, and now of course that's thick, and as in it's quite thick paint, you don't want any runs and stuff, so they just wrap things now, have done for donkey's years, but they can be so much more expressive with the designs.
Well, I tell you what, if ever you can see a Japanese racing livery, they are super flamboyant. And Andrew Harrianto, who also races under the name of Andre Canard in the Far East, his cars are always covered with duck logos, hundreds of them. So thank goodness they're not being hand painted. But a clean session there, I would say. But just fingers crossed for Falco Motorsport, they can get their number 33 Porsche back to the pits. And whatever has gone wrong that left them stuck at the side of the circuit, hopefully it's something that's fixable. So for Sven Muller, he was immediately on the radio telling them, right, I've pulled to the side of the circuit, cars out of harm's way, and hopefully reporting something that will give them a bit of a guide so they can get around to working out how to fix it. But at the Nürburgring, it is the calm before the storm, and I'm just talking about the start of the race. We're going to have more than 130 cars powering away. Not all together, they'll start in their various performance groups in clusters. So effectively, you're down at the first corner. You get 3 race starts to enjoy. It's coming up.
When
4 o'clock.
When one is not enough. Have 3.
Entirely so, but it does, stretch the field out. But it means they all get their equivalent of starting on the front row of the grid if they're at the front of the individual groups, and they're grouped according to their sort of performance potential. But the SP9 class cars, that's the ones that race globally as GT3. They, of course, are at the front grid. They'll be kicking off. But there were a few problems after qualifying, and a couple of cars were ride height infringements, including the 65 Ford Mustang and also the number 35 Walker Horse Aston Martin. That's got Christian Cronjes in. But for now, that is that. Do come back and join us at 14:30 local time for the countdown to the Nürburgring 24 hours.